Hi, I'm Kate Roffey, President of the Melbourne Football Club, and you're listening to a Yank on the Footy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 93 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I am thrilled that you're listening. This is an extraordinarily exciting episode for me. I have to admit, when I reached out initially to invite this guest onto the podcast, I didn't think I would have much of a shot. Very busy position that they are now in, and, I'm a fledgling podcast who's maybe gaining some listenership in some places, but I was so excited when she agreed to come on, and then I got extraordinarily nervous, but we had an absolutely great talk, and I cannot wait to bring this to you. My guest for this episode, and I will introduce her here in just a moment, is the newly minted president of the Melbourne Football Club, Kate Roffey, and just an absolutely delightful person. I had a grand time talking with her. It is fun to converse when your club is 9-0, but I think that if things were reversed, and they're not, of course, she would be just as cordial and just as terrific a person. So I'm really excited to bring this to you. I hope you enjoy it. It was a lot of fun. It was about a month or so in the making before we were able to get together to have the discussion, but just an absolute joyful person with such a positive outlook, and I really think you're going to enjoy this, even if you are not a D's supporter, because this is somebody who has a great outlook for the entire competition, whether it be in the AFL or the AFLW. We got into some issues related to trying to bring the game to the United States a little bit more as well. So I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget that you can find everything that's related to the podcast at my new website, yankonthefooty.com. I hope you'll consider checking it out. If you've listened to any of the live episodes, you know that I do a live episode each week on Wednesday mornings in Melbourne, and you can come on and be a guest and share your views on there. You can leave voicemails on the website as well, which I can then include into the podcast, which has been a great feature. And I just think it's a really good tool. You can review the podcast there. You can get on the mailing list, so when a new episode comes out, you get it extraordinarily quickly. It's the first place that I send a new episode when it comes out, is to the mailing list for those people who have signed up for that. Now, if you like the show and you want to help out the show, and many of you have, and I truly appreciate it, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, this is a hobby for me, but it is a hobby that has, as my wife has said, has taken pretty much all of your free time. If I'm not working on the podcast, I'm watching footy or I'm reading about footy. So this is pretty much what I'm doing right now. So I still have my job. That's certainly not the case, but where that's going to be changing. But if you like the podcast and you want to help it out, that'd be fantastic. You certainly don't have to, but I would greatly appreciate it. I do give you a shout out on Twitter and during the episodes if you've helped out. You can do that by going to the Buy Me a Coffee page, and also if you're interested in any kind of gear for the podcast, I have my store page from Redbubble that's also linked on there. Now the thing about the Buy Me a Coffee page, that's a thing where you make a donation to the podcast, and I know some people, if you make a donation, it sometimes will charge you like the service fee for making the donation, basically covering the cost of the Buy Me a Coffee page, their website, that sort of thing, their organization, to cover their operating costs. Well, I went ahead and set that up to where if somebody was to make a $2 donation, that I cover the whatever the operating cost for making that donation to that. So it only ends up being like $1.70 or whatever the case may be. So it's not anything. If you were donating something, you're not donating beyond what you might be donating. But again, you don't have to do it. it'd be greatly appreciated if you enjoy the show, but certainly you don't have to. I do, like I said, I want to encourage you to sign up for the mailing list. I've got about 4 or 5 dozen people that are on the mailing list all over the world, and when a new episode comes out, I get it to them, like I said, right away. From my brother-in-law who lives in Ireland to my son who's in the U.S. military to a number of people scattered throughout the country of Australia as well as here in the United States. I would love it if you would also go onto the website and leave me a review. Lets me know what you think about the podcast. You can also do it on Apple Podcasts as well, and it will actually migrate back to the Redbubble page, and then I'm able to use those reviews as kind of advertisements on Twitter and on other social media to say, hey, you know what, this is a pretty decent podcast according to this person who's listening to it, and maybe you'd want to check it out as well. So if you'd like to do that, that would be great. If you don't want to, that's okay as well. Also, one other thing, if you are a local footy club, or you're, a fan of a footy club, and you've got, you've got a sticker for your club laying around, what I'm trying to do in my classroom is I have a huge drafting table desk, which is about 4 feet tall by about 4 feet wide. And it has a massive front panel on it. And what I'm trying to do with that panel is to cover it with stickers from different footy clubs, and whether they be local or AFL or Sandful or Waffle or, in the Northern Territories or whatever the case may be. So if you happen to have one of those and you would want to drop it into the post, I do put my mailing address in the show notes, so you can check that out. That would be greatly appreciated. That'd be fantastic if you were able to do that. I do have some stickers from my show, like I said, up on the Redbubble page, and I've got a couple more that should be coming out pretty soon. I've got to divert some finances to that to get that work done and get those things out there for you. So before we dive into the episode, I had a couple of other things I wanted to touch on really quickly. The club of the episode for today is the Yeronga South Brisbane Devils. The club dates all the way back to 1910, and the women's senior club won the championship in their league last year during COVID, because they were able to be playing footy up in Queensland. This weekend, the senior women's club faces the Aspley Hortons in the QAFLW, and the senior men's club faces the Parkridge Pirates in the QFA Division II North Seniors. Best of luck to the Devils this weekend. You can learn more about the Devils on their Instagram page or at yerongafc.com.au, and I'll post a link to that in the show notes. And also, one last thing before we dive into the episode. I borrowed this bit of information from an Instagram post from Narrowly Meadows, who used to be with Fox Footy. She was my guest back in episode 90. Great episode, if you haven't heard it yet. And as many of you know, she had been working for the IPL in India, and she was able to return home to Australia as the COVID spike began recently in India. And she posted on her Instagram page that if anybody in Australia wants to help to donate to the ongoing situation in India, she suggested the at UNICEF Australia India COVID-19 Crisis Appeal, which I believe is their Twitter page. I will post a link to that also in my show notes as well. So sit back and enjoy the episode, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My guest is a sports scientist. She helped spearhead the plan to upgrade the facilities that host the Australian Open Tennis Tournament, securing almost $1 billion to fund the construction. And quite frankly, her list of accomplishments is so impressive that I'm afraid I might miss one if I try to mention all of them. Oh, I do have one more. Last month, she did become the 3rd female president of an AFL club and the 1st female president of the Melbourne Demons Football Club. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Kate Roffey to the podcast. Kate, thanks so very much for taking time out of your morning. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Delighted to be here and delighted to say hi to everyone over there in the US who's an AFL supporter, whether you're a D's fan or not.
And there are quite a few, and it's and about 60% of the listeners are in Australia, but about 40% are scattered around the US or around the rest of the world. So we're reaching a lot of people. So
fantastic.
You've been on the job for about a month. And I know it's a clunky question to ask if you're settling in, but let me ask you it this way. Do you love the job more today than you did a month ago?
Yeah, being 9-zip, probably each week it's getting easier. No, I'm very much a people person, and I love the fact that people come up to me in the street and ask, can they have a selfie, or in the crowd at the MCG, and little kids are coming up and wanting to have a photo taken. Young girls are coming up and saying, we love what you're doing, and you're a great inspiration to us. So every time I get a bit of feedback like that, it just makes the job so much more enjoyable.
Well, one of the things that I've hypothesized is that American sports, the players in many cases have kind of priced themselves out of the sphere, the universe that normal people are in. You're doing selfies with the fans. I watched the Bulldogs play the other night, and within 5 minutes of the game ending, Luke Beveridge is taking selfies with fans in the stands within 5 minutes of the game being over. That kind of stuff doesn't happen here. So I love the family atmosphere that you see with the clubs in the AFL. It's one of the things that really attracted me to it. And I've pretty much given up, other than watching the Cleveland Browns. I've pretty much given up on American sports.
Yeah, look, and it is a different world. The wonderful Lauren Jackson is a very good friend of mine. I've known Loz since she was 16, and when she was playing in the States, we would often talk about the fact of how different it is in the States. And if in the States you were actually out and about like we are as sports people or presidents of clubs in Australia, it would be a completely different thing, because it's a whole different level of sort of superstar and maxis. So I sort of get that it's a bit different in the States, because I lived in the States and I know how massive professional sports are over there. But I do love the fact that we still are accessible, and our players are accessible, and it is very much a family game, and we still get 100,000 people to the MCG for matches, and they all behave themselves, which is fantastic.
Right. Yeah. It's although I won't dig too much into the Richmond game at Marvel the other night, when the Richmond supporters were unhappy having to travel 6 kilometers. To me, that is mind-boggling.
Very upsetting.
I couldn't understand. I was like, you're already playing 14 games there this year. How many more do you need to play there?
That's right, but it's their sort of fortress, so there is that definite home ground advantage.
Right. Yeah, I said
it's not the players, it's the fans.
Yes, yeah. I was like, I'm a Geelong supporter. I would love to see Richmond play down at GMBHA Stadium once, but I know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, just crowd numbers. Yeah. It's just there is a real limitation on how big blockbuster game crowds can be. So
you were previously part of the board of directors. And you've now moved on, and you're somebody who worked with clubs that were involved in private ownership here in the States. You conferred with them, or even in Europe as well. What did the being part of the board of directors, how does that help set you up to become president? And can you take us through a day of what it means to be the president of a footy club?
Yeah, so I've been on the board for 8 years, and I was then moved into vice president. And the big advantage of that is that it's a system that you have to understand, with total player payments and injury payments, and how AFL works as a system, and how game structure works, and how the club works. So the advantage for me is I've been doing that for a long time now, for 8 years. So there's an added level of complexity when you become a president of the club and you're dealing with other clubs and the AFL as well on issues. But the good thing is I don't have to learn all the club-based stuff, because I've done that. Okay. So I can focus more on the AFL presidency. And in speaking to other presidents, my good friend Peggy O'Neill, who's president at Richmond, or Mark McGuinness at Carlton, for example, they say that there is a very different level and an added level of complexity that you do deal with as presidents of clubs, because there's all different sorts of decisions that are made across the league as opposed to within your own club. And that's probably the biggest difference that you get. But in the end, like I chair other boards as well, we are a board of directors, and our responsibility is for the stewardship and the oversight of our football club, like any board of any company. Okay. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. Of course, I have that added forward-facing role as president of leading the club, and I love that part of it. That's really exciting for me.
And the fact that you're out there, you're engaging with whether they be people involved in corporate partnerships and things of that nature to to help to solidify finances, because last year was a terrible year for the AFL. I mean, and it was a great year in terms of exposure here in the United States, because a lot of the games were on, but, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but we do a terrible job of marketing the game here in the States. We're awful at it here. And and I was going to bounce an idea off of you on that a little bit later on, but you talked about, during your initial discussions after you got the position as president, about bringing equity to the game. And what does that look like to you if you project, 5 years down the road or so? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, so equity and inclusion, obviously, being one of few female presidents and our first female presidents, I think it's long overdue that we have a better gender balance. But equity is not just about the gender conversation. It's about a lot of marginalised groups out there who feel like they may not have the right to be involved, or it may not be accessible. And I know in speaking to a lot of people out there, they see someone who, like myself, came from a small country town, went to my local high school and worked my way up career-wise. They start to see that these sorts of things are accessible. And I just say, being women on boards now, or people, whether you're of an Indigenous background in Australia or whether you're a person with a disability, it's a reflection of contemporary society, and it's not very reflective at the moment still in a lot of areas. And part of the real joy I get out of this role is saying that we need to be more contemporary, we need to be more reflective of society, and we will be, with more role models who actually show that, hey, someone has to be it, it might as well be you. So I really get a great deal of joy out of that opportunity to actually show that people from all different backgrounds can actually do these sorts of roles.
And the AFLW has certainly helped to accelerate that. And it's been, and I can honestly say I watched every single game of the regular season this year. It was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, fantastic. And the women, as you'd be well aware, are on a very different, it's semi-professional, we would call it at best. They have a shorter season there. They're not paid as much. I do love I spend a lot of time with our AFLW program, because those young women who play and contribute so much when they work full-time, most of them, or they study as well as play, they are just such excellent people. I mean, they're not just players, they are really, really, really good people. And I love, as a club, we try to do everything that we can to make them the best people that they can be, both our men and our women who play for us. We want them to be the best people first and foremost, and better people make better players. And that's something that we really focus on a lot.
And do you see, and I know they just moved the start date for the upcoming season to December, so there would not be an overlap. And if I'm not mistaken, they added another round to the season as well, and bringing in 2, possibly 4 teams this year, and then at least the last 2 the next year. Then,
we won't bring any more in just yet, but yes, they have done that. And the main reason for the move is that we'd love the men's and women's seasons to run together, and for games to sort of be played back to back. The problem is that our staff who work in the system are the same staff who do both, in terms of administration, and also some of our on-field support staff. So we'll have people flying from one of our women's games over to Adelaide for the men's game overnight. So at the moment, the only way that we can actually really support both as much as we need to support them is to split the season. But ideally, they would become, at some future point in time, self-sufficient in their own resourcing rights, which means that you could actually have the seasons running simultaneously. But there's all sorts of problems with access to grounds and facilities and staff and those sorts of things. So it makes it a long season, though.
And part of it, I think, also is that, because I see, quite a few people on social media who are, they've kind of got their heels dug in a little bit because they've not watched the women's comp. And I did, and lots of other people did too. I mean, the scoring increased quite a bit this year, but, a lot of people have not yet given it a chance. And I think that having an opportunity for it to kind of be out there standing on its own as a lead in to the men's comp, I think could do wonders for it, because it's gonna kind of whet the appetite for the the stubborn footy fan who maybe didn't want to watch the women's comp, and they might say, okay, I'll watch it. And they'll say, this is pretty darn good.
Yeah, absolutely. And the two things. One is we find there's a whole new group of people who are now engaged because of the women's team. And as you said, if you think the men's, AFL players and things are accessible here in Australia, then you should go to a women's match, because they will be standing on the sidelines having photos and selfies in the crowd with people for an hour. They just love it. So they're very, very accessible. We're finding a lot of different people are coming to the game because of that. And to those who don't watch the AFL and comment, well, have a look at it before you start to make comments. We get plenty of that, shouldn't be this, shouldn't be that. It's like, I haven't even seen it. So you watch it and you want to contribute to the conversation, absolutely. You don't watch it, then don't comment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I agree with you on that. It's been, and I'm drawing a blank on her name right now, but the midfielder from Fremantle, I think it could play in the women's team. I can't. Yeah. Kira. Yeah, she could play. I think she could play in the men's comp. And and still get 7 or 8 tackles a game. She's just a phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah. But it's just watching the faces of the girls, the young girls in the crowd. Seeing that there's somebody that looks like me that I can maybe kind of emulate, and that's an opportunity for me. 5 or 10 years down the road that I can be out there on that ground. And maybe by then it's got itself in a stable enough position that it is a full-time job, that it is, that would be fantastic. I would imagine that has to be a dream of yours as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a thing, interesting point. It's like men's and women's golf. We watch the men's professional golf, but you're never going to be able to hit the ball like Rory McIlroy or Tiger Woods or something. But you watch the women's and we think, well, it's not unachievable to actually play. And it's a bit the same with the women's AFLW. They are such skilled players now that a lot of people, including young men who are, not going to get to a level of a Max Scorn or a Cozzy Pickett or someone like that, but they can emulate a Karen Paxman or an Eden Zanker, because those women are so exceptional that's something that young men can look at and actually emulate and say, hey, I can actually do that as well. And I think that's where I'm saying we're getting a whole different sort of group of people who are watching the AFLW, because the skill set is just so exceptional that it's a game. Like I say, if you're not watching it and you're commenting, then you're not welcome in the commentary. But if you watch it and you comment, then that's a different thing, because I think if you watch it like yourself, Craig, you watch it, you really get your eyes open to just how high a quality level this game is being played at.
And it is, like I said, it is improved year to year. Now I think maybe they maybe took a slight step back when they added 4 new clubs, all at one time, because and that was, I was going to ask you that. I said, is there a concern about bringing 4 new clubs in? Because I know that these clubs want to have a women's club. I get that. I know that Mr. Kennett up in Hawthorne has been pretty adamant about wanting to get one. But is there concern about a dilution of the talent pool too much?
And we talk about this quite a bit. Is, do you bring the clubs in, and the new clubs obviously do struggle in their first few years usually, because they're gelling as a team. Whether or not you've got good players doesn't necessarily mean you can play well as a team. So that happens. So there's the two different conversations. Do you just bring all the teams in at once and then it'll settle after a few years and we'll bring enough younger players up through the AFL ranks to all get to a similar sort of level? Or do you let it settle more and then bring the teams in later? Now, it's there's two sides of the argument there. You can...
that's a great point.
You can bring them in. The big difference is most of those teams are still based in Melbourne, and that does dilute the playing pool in Victoria a lot more than it does in other states. And there's a conversation that says why is it Adelaide or Brisbane who constantly challenge for premierships, and you'll find that they have a much more settled pool of players, because at the moment there's one team in Adelaide, for example. Port don't have one at the moment, so the player pools are a bit different to access. But at some point in time, every team will have an AFL women's team, and we'll have a full and rounded competition. And it's a bit of a flip of the coin as to when you do it. Resourcing is another thing, and the length of the season. Obviously, all teams want to play each other, and the bigger the competition gets, then the longer the season will be, and that's a resourcing issue for clubs at the moment. So there's a lot. It's a very complicated question. It's one of those things, as you say, we talk about at the AFL.
So you brought up a point that I guess I didn't really consider before, but there is not as much interstate movement in the women's comp with the players. They pretty much stay within their state.
Yeah, okay. It's because they have a livelihood,
jobs or schools. Okay.
Yeah, so you're not actually moving. Okay. A lot of them do actually move for their football careers, but a lot work. Have full-time jobs where they are. So taking 3 or 4 months out plus training, pre-season training to move, and some have done it and very happily have done it, but others are a bit more linked to where they work because they're not actually paid. They can't make a full-time living out of football. So it's a little bit different to the men's, whereas the men go to play. That's their profession. So
yeah, and I knew it wasn't a full-time position yet, because I tell people here about the person that I consider to be the baddest person on the planet, and being Jess Wushner. After having what she went through last year with the lightning incident, and then a couple days later she's back. She's working as a stevedore, and then a couple days later she's back on the grounds at practice. And I was like, no other human being is going to be able to do that sort of thing. It's just
they're incredible. We've got one player who travels for 2 hours each way to training because she lives down in the country on her family's farm.
Okay,
and that's how committed they are to actually playing, and there is something about playing in a team. I mean, it's such a great thing to be able to be part of a team sport at whatever level it is, that they love it and they get so much value out of it. But they're different competitions, and hopefully it'll come. It's something certainly I'll be very committed to working on. I know Nick Livingston and others at the AFL are very committed to continuing to grow our competition and support it. But it's going to take some time, but we're getting there.
And I've reached out to her as well, to her management group, and I think they forwarded the email on to her. So I've not heard. That's only been a few days, but we'll see if that happens. But is there something that because there are lots of supporters of the game, here in the United States and other parts around the world. Is there something that supporters that they're outside of Australia that you think that they should know about footy that they don't know?
No, look, I find it quite fascinating, and I came from outside of Victoria. I grew up in New South Wales, and we were not, where I grew up, an AFL town. We were league and union, so I didn't really understand this massive AFL machine until I got to Victoria. But I think one of the things in COVID, and we have Irish women in particular who play in the AFLW, and we've had 3 Irish women over here this year. It has just taken off enormously in Ireland because these women over there are huge Gaelic football superstars. I mean, their faces are on sides of buses over in Ireland, so they're very well known. They come and play here, and all of a sudden the AFL in Ireland has taken off thanks to these Irish women in particular who are playing in the AFLW. So I think maybe we need a couple more people from the US, like Mason Cox or others, because really there's a huge interest when you've got a homegrown hero playing that actually sparks a bit of interest. But of course, when we were in COVID last year and we were actually playing live sport and no other country was, there were a lot of eyes that turned to AFL. And I remember listening to an American overview of AFL, and they were talking about why do they keep punting the ball. We don't actually call it punting in Australia, but there was a lot to learn. But even they were saying this is just such a great game to watch. And I think that is the thing with AFL, even if you don't understand the rules and what holding the ball is, and let's face it, none of us really understand that.
Even some of the people wearing yellow shirts can't figure that out.
Exactly, yeah. It's a very the great thing about it is that it's such an arbitrary call. I mean, you see something happen you blow the whistle and you make a call, and half the crowd obviously agree with you and half disagree. But it's just such an exciting and fascinating game to watch because the ball is always moving, and the skill of the athletes is unbelievable.
I think it is the greatest game on the planet. And I've been a baseball fan for over half a century, and I don't watch baseball anymore. Because I am so caught up with this game. And
AFL.
I love this game, and there are lots of us like that here. And it's and I was just mentioning, I jotted down here, I said, we finally got the games back on here in the States, where they're carrying they're carrying 3 games a week, but there's no advertising for it.
Yeah. Okay,
I've been, screaming my head off as much as I can to say that if they did like the Fox Sports channel here did like an hour-long highlight show in prime time, at 8:00 in the evening here, saying, here's what happened in the previous week. And put an ad on saying, at least set your DVR and watch this other game later on.
Yeah,
it would, even if you were only to capture, 1% of the people here in the United States as fans, that's 3 million more fans.
That's right. It's huge, isn't it?
It's
a highlight reel from the AFL is unbelievable. I mean, you've got marks that are being taken.
Oh yeah.
Standing on people's heads. You've got kicks from outside 50 metres. We've got a barrel kick going from the defending goal square into the centre square last week. I mean, that's like 75, 80 metres. Yeah, it's huge. So the highlight reel is just fascinating. And that's the way to start it, I think. Like you say, get people interested in the highlights. And I can assure you, pretty much any match you watch, there's going to be 4 or 5 of those highlight reel activities going on.
And the thing that's even more mind-boggling here is that if a game ends early, one, you never get to see the song. But if it ends early, they cut to it's the same piece of video that they've been using for years. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's of some rugby league that I have no idea who it is, and it's really bad techno music. So they go from playing footy to showing it an old video clip of somebody playing rugby and not saying, hey, these are 2 different games here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think from a marketing standpoint, they could do so much better.
Yeah, there's 4 codes of football, of course, here in Australia, so it's confusing at the best of times. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the team song is such a huge thing here. People hang around to see their team sing the song on the field. It's such a big thing. And then down in the change rooms, it's the team get together and sing their song. I'm not sure that there's another sport that I can think of that actually have that team song sort of, it really is a tribal thing here. It's if you've got a good team song, then you get supporters because they love to sing that song. There
are a few instances in college football, for example. Like Ohio State will go sing with their band, or the Army Navy, like the Army and Navy academies will go and sing to the midshipmen or cadets in their group. They'll go sing it. And when they play each other, you want to sing last because that means you won the game. So it's but it's amazing. It's I think it could grow exponentially here, if that was to happen. But you spend all this time working with different clubs, whether it be Manchester United or Arsenal or the Giants and the Yankees in New York or the Cowboys. And a lot of those things where you were working with the tennis group to try to get, updates there. Have you been able to take anything that you learned during that and apply it to what you're doing now?
Yeah, look, one of those things, and you mentioned baseball, and I do love baseball when I'm in the States. And here in Australia, people have a perception that baseball goes for hours, like it's a really long game. I would say it's usually actually a lot shorter than an AFL match, and a long game is 2 hours. But when you go to the States, it's all about the fan activation and the crowd engagement. And I remember going to spending some time with the Washington Redskins, and I was down there for their season opener against the Giants.
Okay.
And they said, you've got to come to the game. You could do all these things, And I said, what time should I get here? And they said, 11:30 at the latest. And I thought, 12:30 game, 12:40 game. The game started like 4:20 p.m. I had to be there at 11:30 so I could go to all 4 concerts, so I could have lunch with the group, so I could go to some of the other activation zones. It's just it really is a day out.
Right.
In the States, it's a day out at the baseball, and you have your tailgating and things like that. And we very much here in Australia, we go to the game sort of half an hour before it starts. We watch the game and then we go out. And I really would like to see some more of that activation happening here, because I think there's a huge opportunity for people who can't actually physically get to the game because they don't live in Melbourne, or we play in Adelaide this week, so some supporters will go over, but not a lot, not as many as we get here. So that other activation gives others the opportunity to actually feel part of the club, as opposed to the older style. If you're a member, you go to the game and that's how you're involved. So I think in this day and age, and COVID has certainly shown us this with all our online activity, that there is great opportunity to engage more people and to have better fan engagement outside of just being at the ground and the game itself. So that's something that interests me a lot, because as I'm sitting here talking to someone in the US about an AFL podcast, we've obviously got to reach, and this is something Manchester United do fantastically well. They have got more members of their club that live outside of the UK than they actually do that live in the UK.
Wow.
People in South America just want to be a member of Manchester United.
Well, it's and European football is huge here in the States. It's on television all the time, and I think part of it has to do with the time difference also, because London is 5 hours ahead of the East Coast of the United States, so it's those games kind of fit right into our mornings or our afternoons, so it dovetails well with American football once that's done, which is why I think that the AFL, it would, could be so great here, because it's, people who love, American football, love that action, love the contact and that sort of thing. And there are a lot of football fans who are not baseball fans. And this would be a great transition, because it starts up right at, the men's comp starts right up after the Super Bowl is done and ends, right as, like first couple weeks of the season. It is just, and I'm doing my level best to recruit as many fans as I possibly can. And
I think that's it. I mean, it will grow, as more people watch it and understand it. I think that's the other thing. It's my family are in Queensland, and they're not AFL. They are now, because I've been involved in a football club, and they watch, and they're gradually learning the rules and understanding it. So, and that always helps. I think we should I always say, how do we get more people involved overseas and things? I say we've got to educate them about what is a mark. What is holding the ball? We don't have any offside or anything in AFL, and people just can't understand it. They're like,
I love that.
That's why it's such a rounded game.
I work as an announcer for football and soccer here in the States, and I joke that soccer is a communist sport because they don't let you use all of your body parts.
And when I'm involved with one of our new A-League teams.
The A-League team,
Western United, and we're always losing by one goal because we just get pinned by an arbitrary offside rule or something. And can imagine, like hockey, sort of, if you open the game up a bit more, the field hockey I'm talking about here in Australia, but if you open the game up a bit more, which they did by tweaking some of those rules, it just made it a faster, much more exciting game to play.
In some ways, it's where you're getting penalized for being faster than your opponent. And
what's wrong with that?
And it's a calculated risk. It's in many ways what Footy did with the 6-6-6 rule. Where if you got a lead and you're wanting to drop a couple extra people back into the defensive 50, try to protect that lead. Well, now you can't do that because they're trying to open the game up. And
the man on the mark and those sorts of things. And they have unusual implications, because of course the standing on the mark, you used to be able to move. Now you have to stand still on the mark. It allows now, particularly in the 50-metre zone, it now allows a player to run around and gain a few extra metres.
Right.
Get that kick goals that they wouldn't have been able to before, because they just wouldn't have made the distance. They would have been stopped by the man on the mark. So when we changed rules, all sorts of things happened that you weren't expecting. I think the 6-6-6 rule didn't have as much impact as we thought. We've got less rotations, and now they're standing on the mark rule this year. So we were waiting to see what impact that has had, but it doesn't seem to have had any huge impact, fortunately. So, and look, everyone plays under the same rules, so it would be different.
Right.
Some teams had the rotational rule and others didn't, but everyone has to adjust and adapt. It's across the board. So it's interesting.
Or play all their games at the MCG.
That's right. We are the oldest team in the competition. It is our home ground. So
and they have you
play there all the time.
And they have you playing in a lot of different places and calling it home.
Yeah, everyone plays away because we have
Right.
interstate teams, and it's obviously not fair if they travel all the time. So we travel to their team. Something you may not know over in the US, because I know the gridiron that the NFL's played on, for example, is exactly the same everywhere. Every AFL field is different in terms of size and shape. And that's why they talk about different advantages at home grounds and various other things, because some are long and skinny, some are shorter and fatter. The MCG is huge. So different, there is no stock standard dimensions for an AFL ground, and that's why there are different home ground advantages, and that's why it's interesting to play at Marvel Stadium with the roof closed most of the time. You're in the same conditions all the time versus the MCG, and I can assure you, when you're standing down on the field versus when you're standing in the stands, it's about 10 degrees colder for a start, and there's this enormously swirly wind down there that you just don't feel up in the stands. So the conditions do change a lot across grounds.
Yeah, one of the things that I love seeing is that, and I've got several people that do this, is when they take photographs from where they sit in the stands, because until this time last year, I had never actually even seen a Sharon in person, let alone a game.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So just being able to see the different vantage points from the grounds is just, to me, is just fascinating, because it makes me feel a little bit more like I'm there than since I've never been there before.
And look, I'm not sure, it's become a bit of a talisman or something, but to go into the change rooms, when the game finishes, I actually go down to the edge of the field, because it's a little high from where I usually sit. And so I down there, and so I've been standing in the players' race just watching the end of the game, and now that's become you're going to be in the players' race at the end of the game. But I actually love being down there, because I spend most of my time turned around and looking back up at the crowd, because I'm standing, at field level and looking up into this massive sea of red and blue scarves and jumpers and people just willing this team over the line. And it's just to be there. And seriously, if you are in the States or you're somewhere that you haven't actually seen a live game of AFL at the MCG, put it on your bucket list, because it really, the feeling and the support when your team is enormous. It's just huge. So I absolutely get what you say when you say you're watching it on television, because you don't even get the view of the whole field at any one time on TV. And that's the great thing about watching it live, is there's a lot going on that you don't actually see on the camera in terms of defense.
That's one of the things that the NFL does, is that they actually they will sell to people that they want to buy it what they call the coach's camera, which is like the camera that's above the goalposts. You can see all 22 players on the ground. I love it when they go to that high camera above the goalposts, where you can begin to see how people are deploying on the field, because that tight shot, you just don't get to see it, and it's great to be able to see that.
No, and that's the thing, is when you understand the game, you'll sit there and, Cosy Pickett will kick a goal, and I'll say, oh, well done, Luke Jackson, who's, way back out of camera shot, halfway back up the field. But it was a shift that he pulled off that allowed the ball to get through. There's so much that happens off the ball in terms of allowing the ball to get through, whether it's shepherding or doing other things like that you just don't get to see in those close-up shots. So I always watch at the venue, then I come home and I watch it on the replay on the television when I get home.
Now, I had just a couple of really short questions here for you, because I know you've got a busy day here, and I don't want to take up too much of your time here. You've been involved in so many different sports, around the world and that sort of thing. Who are some of the greatest athletes or sports people that you've seen in person?
Oh, look, I'd say the fabulous Lauren Jackson. As I said, she's absolutely the world's greatest female basketballer. She's just been taken into the Hall of Fame. Just was announced last week. So Loz I've known, and she's been a very dear friend of mine since she was 16, and I've had the opportunity to not just see but be part of her growth and development and her journey over in the US and Russia and various other places she's played. Okay. So, to me, I am fortunate enough that, I was with Sam Stosur when she won her US Open title in the States, in New York. So I've been fortunate enough, because of the work that I do, to have had the opportunity to be involved with some of these people. I worked with Linford Christie when I was a biomechanist at the Institute of Sport. I've worked with some fabulous swimming, Nick Livingston, someone that we've mentioned there, Lindley Frame, who was a world breaststroking champion. They're very good friends. So I have to say I have been fortunate enough to, because of my background as a sports scientist and the sort of places I've worked and things, to have these people in my lives directly. So it's a huge honour. And now, of course, I've got my, 60 odd, surrogate children in my AFL men and AFL women at the Melbourne Football Club that I love working with as well. They're just such fantastic young people, and it's just such a joy. It makes my job so pleasurable to have the opportunity to work directly with those players.
It's funny you mentioned that. I do have to ask, this is a follow-up then really quickly. You do have a birthday database for all the cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was just tossing that out there, but
no, I do. I have mobile numbers. I have the birthday. I have partners lists and things.
Fantastic.
It's like I said, their families. They're part of the Melbourne Football Club family.
Right,
they are people first and foremost. And I say to Chris Petrarca when he signs a 7-year contract with the club, and I'm having a chat to him, he says, "Thanks for caring about us players." And I say, "Chris, I care about you people. I'll know Chris Petrarca, the person, for a lot more years than I'll know Chris Petrarca, the player." And it's really important to me that they are good people and they have great opportunities when they finish playing football.
So you got, even though it's a very rewarding job, it has to be a little bit stressful. How do you unwind? And yeah, I know you've only been doing it for a while, but how do you unwind? Are you a music person, a podcast person, or you just you cycle?
Yeah, I do play the guitar. So
okay.
I'm sitting in my office here at the moment because I have other work. We talk about the fact that these roles are volunteer roles, unpaid, so we have to work to pay the mortgages and things. So I have about 7 or 8 guitars and a banjo and things. So I'll pick those up when I need a break. But I'm actually it's become very common knowledge, I think, here in Australia. But I'm actually a woodworker, so I make handmade furniture, dovetail joints and things like that. And that's really that, or horse riding, something like that. I'll go and do those things, which are just absolutely, you're focused on doing those things. Other thoughts don't creep into your head. And I find that's like my meditation time. I go and do that, and I come back refreshed and ready to go again.
Now you've got a beautiful piece over your right shoulder that looks like some Indigenous artwork. Did you make that frame as well?
I did make that frame. Yes, I did. And I put those there's 3 paintings there. I'm not sure if you can see them, but those paintings are actually from the Northern Territory. They're from Uluru, from Indigenous artists up there. So yes, I framed them, and they're beautiful piece of work. But I did make the frame. Yes.
That is beautiful work there. Yes. Now I've ran into this question, and I've asked this to a couple of people here. You're in a room with everybody that you have ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you go look for?
Who do I go look for?
Who's the person you go look for?
Yeah, in terms of just to have a chat and the safety.
A chat,
it would be, I reckon, it's probably my sisters. I've got, sisters that I'm very close to, because it doesn't matter what else you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're the president of the football club, and they're incredibly proud of that, but I'm still their older or their younger sister. And, I think that sort of thing, it's always grounding to just find those people that are people who know you as you are. And, someone said, "Oh, you're the human president, you're so human." I said, "Well, I'm the same person I was the day before I came president, and I'll be the same person the day I am when I finish being president." It's a job, but it doesn't make me any more important as a person. And those people are people, friends, family that I'll go to, because that's where I don't have to be the president of the football club at that point in time. I'm just me again.
Great answer. Now, last question for you. What is your autobiography going to be called?
I don't know. I think it'd probably be called Career by Chaos, I think. People ask, did you ever dream of doing this? I was on the board for 7 years. I didn't, think of becoming president. It's really a matter of being right person, right time, right place in all of those things that I've done. And all I can say to people out there when they ask, how do you do it, is just go with your gut. If the opportunity comes there and it feels like it's right, you just say yes, whether or not, think what's going to happen. This is going to be a wild and crazy ride, I'm sure. But, you're asked and you step up and say, yep, must be my time to do it. And off you go and do it. So when the door opens, it seems like the right door, just walk through it.
That's a great title. I like that. I like that. Career by chaos.
Yeah, it's pretty true. I think that's
well. I mean, that's
true.
you got that's it, and that's a term that shows up. The whole chaos thing shows up in footy as well. When you're cleaning up that ball in front of the goal. Well,
yeah, I'll have to write that down so I don't forget now.
Well,
thanks for that, Craig.
I'll send it. I'll send it to you in an email. Okay, I'll remind you about that then. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank my my guest, Melbourne Demons President Kate Roffey, for joining me this morning. Kate, I cannot thank you nearly enough for taking time out of your morning to stop by with me today. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. This was an absolute blast. It was a joy to talk to you, and I wish you the best of luck this year, except for one round because you have to play Geelong again. But other than that, 21-1 won't be all bad.
No, look, it would be fantastic. At the moment, there's no president who wouldn't rather be me. But thank you, thanks for inviting me, and thanks for taking an interest in our fabulous sport. And hopefully, over the podcast, I've attracted one or two more Demon members. So get in behind get on the D train, people, because it's going to be an exciting ride, I think.
Well, that's one thing I didn't ask you was what's your, if for those people who are not committed to a club yet, why should they be a Demons fan?
Because we want to be the best club on and off the field. And I think that's something that's really resonating very strongly at the moment through our club is people are seeing that we're welcoming, we're engaging, we are inclusive, we are respectful of all people. And I think, that's something that really is attracting a lot of people to the Melbourne Footy Club at the moment. And that's reflected in the way that we're playing on the field. Those things, inclusion, respect, they're things that you're actually seeing those players living and dying by out on the field, and our supporters are feeling it. And, it's just a great club to be involved in. Everybody is welcome here, and it's one huge Melbourne family. And, the more we can get into our family and more people we can get on the train, the better. Everyone is welcome.
Fantastic. Thanks so very much. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
A huge thank you to Kate Roffey for taking time out of her schedule this week to sit down and talk with me. An absolute pleasure. Just a wonderful person with such a positive outlook for the club, for life, for where she sees the both competitions going in the future. Absolute pleasure to talk with her, and I cannot thank her enough. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got an idea for a show topic, or if you know somebody that you think should be a guest on the show, maybe it is you. Feel free to shoot me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can leave me a voicemail or a message on my website. You can drop me a direct message on Twitter. You can shoot me a note on Instagram or on Facebook at yankonthefooty. I'd love to hear from you. Remember, you can find all of the episodes for this podcast at yankonthefooty.com. You can find everything else related to the podcast as well there. Remember, you can also locate the storefront page or the Buy Me a Coffee page if you're interested in checking those things out. I am going to start getting my episodes updated on my YouTube channel. I've been a little neglectful on that because that's a somewhat time-consuming process to upload the episodes there, so I have to be a little... I have to have some time that I can set aside, and with the school year coming to end here pretty soon, I will get the episodes that I do not have up to date on there on the YouTube channel, because I have had some people begin to listen there, and I would like to hopefully grow that as well. Don't forget, folks, that you can reach me, as I said, at yankonthefooty@gmail.com, as well as on Twitter at yank_on. I do ask that you consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family if you like this episode. Hopefully if I'm assuming there'll be several D supporters listening to this one. Share this one with your fellow D supporters, and maybe you'll learn something about your new club president that you didn't know already. Also, if you would consider taking time to give me a review either on my website or on Apple Podcasts, that lets me know what I'm doing well, lets me know what I can improve on. You can actually leave a review on a website called podchaser.com as well, which is kind of like a podcasting clearinghouse site where reviews can be done and people can interact with other podcast hosts and that type of things. It's kind of a neat little website there. But if you would leave a review, that would be greatly appreciated. It would be absolutely fantastic if you did that. Folks, I want to thank you for listening. Again, I I know there are lots of different footy podcasts out there. So there are some great ones. There are not enough hours in the day for me to listen to all of the footy podcasts that I want to listen to. I've recommended several of them. I've had several of them on as guests on my podcast as well. There are some terrific ones out there. And if you love this game and you want to get insight from different people about different aspects of the game, you can certainly check out a number of those. They are wonderful. You know, I'm one blade of grass in a lawn of footy podcasts. You know, I think mine is growing a little bit. I believe that having the president of one of the clubs is a big step forward for my podcast. I hope that might open some doors for me in terms of my ability to say, here's who I've had on as a guest. But there are a lot of footy podcasts out there. And, you know, like I said, you can scroll through my list of episodes, and I've had probably a dozen of them stop by as guests on my podcast. I've gone on a few of them myself as well. You know, this is a game, folks, that we all love. You know, we have our clubs that we support, or maybe you're new to the game and you're just figuring it out. You're wanting to figure out who to support. If you're finding yourself here and you're not sure what club you want to support, well, you know who I support. You know, I've made that clear in many episodes. I made it clear in this episode as well. But I can't tell you who to support. But what I can recommend to you is to go back and listen to my first episode of this podcast, where I kind of outlined the steps that I took when I became a supporter of the Cats. It's the process that I went through in order to decide who I wanted to cheer for. For those of you in the U.S., you do not root for a club in Australia. Okay? Ask your friends about that one. Again, folks, we are all fans of this game. It's a game that we all love. It is footy, the greatest game on the planet. Again, I do ask that you share this episode or my website with your friends and family so they can check it out. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, may your dribble kick never hit the post. And until next time, I will catch you later. This has been episode number 93 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on or at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at A Yank on the Footy, as well as on my website, yankonthefooty.com. Please share the podcast with your friends and family. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye.